open Adobe Illustrator and let's get started drawing a fruit or a vegetable for your animation. As you can see here, I've already got an example of an orange character. So I'm going to walk you through the steps that I went through to get to that point. So File, New, to create a new artboard. Let's change our units to pixels, and we're making it 640 by 480, and click on the landscape orientation and select OK. You should end up with an artboard just like this. The tools we're using are going to be the selection tool, the direct selection tool, the ellipse tool, which is under here, you'll probably get a rectangle there, and the pencil tool. I'll just show you how shapes work in Illustrator. When you draw a shape, you just click and you drag. If I want a shape of a particular dimension, I can click once with my cursor, enter the values. So I might want it 100 by 150, and it does exactly that. Now, as you can see, my shape has a black outline, which is here. It's called a stroke. On the right, I can actually change the attributes of that. If your toolbar looks like this, you can either select different parts of your toolbar or the arrow at the top to unpack them all. And as you can see, I can change the color of that stroke around it, and under stroke here I can change the weight so it's thicker, and I can do that with any shape that I draw in Illustrator. I'm going back to the left here, click on fill, and I want to change the inside color. Now, as you can see, any color is possible there, and I can also use the arrow in the corner to switch between them. So now it's like that. I might try and change the weight around it, or if I decide I don't want a stroke, I can click on none. So I'm going to delete that, and we're going to hold down on the shape tool, and it should bring up the options. Can you see that there? The ellipse tool. This enables me to draw all sorts of round shapes. Notice that some are squashed horizontally and vertically, or like a circle. You can either click once and put your values in, or your measurements, or as you click and drag, it draws from the top, left, or right hand corner, or from the bottom, and you can draw. Imagine that it's in a cube. Now, if I don't want it squashed but want an exact circle, I hold down Shift, and it maintains the height and the width proportions. So I'll do that once more, holding down Shift to get a proper circle. If I want it to be a circle scaling from the middle, I hold down Shift and Alt. So there's a circle for my fruit. I'll choose a color, and I need to make that the fill color, so I select fill, choose my color. I don't want an outline, so I'm going to turn that off, and I've started the body. We're going to continue with the circle shape and draw some eyes. I want to show you first how selecting works. Notice that this is an active shape. It's got a path around it and anchors showing, and if I select the top left arrow tool, the selection tool, and click off it, it's now deselected. I click on it and it's selected, and I can edit it just like that. So what I want to do is deselect it by clicking off the object. While I'm working with a shape tool, like the ellipse tool, I may want to draw one shape and then fill it with a different color and deselect. So that would involve going all the way over here and clicking on the selection tool, but there's a keyboard shortcut. By holding down Control, it brings up the selection tool temporarily, and then I can click off there. I'm going to change the color to black for the pupil, and draw a pupil there. As you can see, it's kind of small, so I can either redraw it again, or holding down Control, it brings up some options to scale a shape. So I'm holding down Shift and Alt to scale up the size of that shape. I'll show you again with the body. Just click on it holding Control, Shift and Alt, and it brings up a whole lot of other options for working with shapes. Now I want to duplicate the eye, so instead of drawing it again, it's made much easier by using Selection Tool. I'm holding down Control, but you could go and select it there. And to select more than one object at a time, you either click and drag over them, or you click and hold Shift and select both. Now, still holding Control for my Selection Tool, I just hold down Alt, and as you can see, a second arrow appears, and that second arrow means that I can duplicate something. So my orange now has some eyes. What I might do now is use a different shape to put where the stem joins on the top of the orange. So I'm going to change my tool to a star tool. I'll just demonstrate, maybe using a green. This is the star that it draws. But if I want extra points on my star, I can push up or down on my cursor arrows on my keyboard, and it will change the number of points. So I actually am aiming for about 6. No, not that many. It's jumping, so that looks pretty good. And I want to scale it down. I'm going to squash it a bit. So I'm actually intentionally distorting the height in relation to the width. And there is the star shape on the top of my orange. Alright, I think we might also put a little ellipse in there, so I'm changing tools again, change my green, and I'm just going to put an ellipse here, not holding down Shift because I want it to look like a squash circle, and this is where my stem comes out. So if I want to permanently change to the Selection tool, I can use V on my keyboard, so if I tap V, it switches to that tool. Click on the shape, and I can just use my cursor keys to center it. How about we try a new tool to draw a stem? So I'm going to use this pencil tool here, and just select it, and as you can see, I can draw a path, and it follows where you draw. So if I draw a stem just here, I've got a path, but it's got no fill or stroke. In this instance, I want to change the stroke, and I'm going to make it dark blue. Now, it's quite thin, so I'm going to increase the stroke weight. There's an arrow next to the stroke name, and I click on that twice, and it brings up some options. I'm just double clicking on the names of those so I can see my options. Each stroke has some attributes, so I want rounded caps on the end of my stroke. Make it slightly thicker, and this now behaves like an object. So I can move it around and redraw it. And on my keyboard brings up my pencil tool, and I can redraw parts of it. That looks pretty good. While I'm still going, I might do an arm. So I just have to be careful not to draw too close to this because it will edit what I've already drawn, like so. So I'm going to draw over here, possibly deselecting before I do first, and position an arm. It's got a funny end because there's extra anchors there, so I could redraw it till I'm happy with how it looks. That's much better. Now some fingers. So I might deselect, make the pen a bit thinner, and I'll draw a thumb on this side, just restroking it till I'm happy. And on this side I want some fingers joining on together. That's quite good. Now I want this to behave as one whole object. Notice when I select any one part that I've drawn so far, they're individual objects. If I drag over those parts or hold down Shift and select each of them, I can then go Object, Group. When I hold down Alt on it and drag it, like my eye before, I can duplicate it, and I want to reflect it. So I'm going to right click, choose Transform and Reflect, hit Preview so I know which way it's going to flip. There's horizontal and here's vertical, which suits me. Hit OK, and just using my keyboard cursors, the up, down, left and right keys to position it. If I want to move one increment, I just hit it once. If I want to move 10, I hold down Shift and it will move 10 at a time. So that's looking quite good. He needs a bit more expression, so how about we get a mouth in there. To make the mouth shape, I want a crescent shape, and I'm going to create a crescent using the ellipse tool. Notice that there's no shape to create that, so use the ellipse tool, draw a circle and fill that shape, and then I'm going to duplicate it, Control Alt, duplicate it, and as you can see where they overlap they leave a crescent shape. What I want to do is just make it a different colour so you can see what goes on here. So I have two overlapping shapes and I want to cut them out where they sit. So there's a tool called Pathfinder. Go Window, Pathfinder, and it brings up that tool. I mostly use this one, Unite and Divide. You can use some of these other tools which will choose part of the object, and that's the shape that I'm after, but I'll show you what Divide does. I click Divide and it cuts all the overlapping shapes. I choose Object Ungroup to separate them, and then using my selection tool I deselect and I can move all those parts away from each other. As you can see, it enables me to combine different shapes and then cut them out to make other shapes, or to join them using the Unite tool. So I'm deleting these parts, put this mouth in place. It looks a bit big, so I'm going to hold Shift and Alt and just scale it down a little. It looks friendlier. I'm going to make a leaf on top of here to complement the design, and I'm going to use that same technique. So firstly an ellipse. This time when I draw an ellipse I'm going to duplicate it, holding down Shift and Alt, and I can imagine this makes a leaf shape. So let's select them both, drag over both or hold Shift, Divide, Object, Ungroup, and this is the shape I was after. Let's delete the bits we don't want. I want to choose this leaf shape and I want to make it the same colour as the star, so I'm going to use the eyedropper, which is I on your keyboard. While it's selected, click on the star. It will copy the same attributes, the colour and the stroke. So that's in place. V on my keyboard to bring the leaf across, and outside this selection box, if I place my cursor just outside there, there's a little curvy arrow and it enables me to tilt or rotate my shape. So I've done just that. Put it into position. The last thing I want to do to finish my character is just put a little line on that leaf. So I'm going to use my pencil tool again, draw my line. Notice that it's got no stroke and fill, so I'm going to choose a colour under swatches, and I might choose that same mid-green, and under stroke options just here I'm going to make it thicker for starters. Let's put a stroke on there, so I'm going to switch that, not swatch it. Turn the fill color off, say none, select the stroke and make it thicker. I actually want pointy ends on this, and so there's no pointy end option for the cap, but there is a profile down here for different sorts of lines. So I'm going to change that to this profile, and as you can see, it's given me a nice pointy end on either. So there's our character. It's a good idea to save it. File, save as, and let's call this orange character, and you put your name in there, not my name. Save it as an Illustrator file and make sure it goes in a folder where all your other character files are, and hit save.